launching the just launching the community. And so I onboarded in the fall and just launched the community earlier this month. So I'm happy. I'm really excited. This is very topical. It's what I've been doing in the last 6 months, ramping up. So thanks for letting me be here.
Absolutely. And sorry for the little disturbance. I realized one of our most asked question, apart from onboarding, was if we're recording the conversation. So to make sure that we make that, sorry for the introduction there. And we're so happy to have you. I know onboarding has been top of mind for you as you're kind of building now the Vera community. So I'm really excited to hear what you've learned along the way and what you'll share with us today. And Laura, over to you. Tell us a bit more about your background, what you're working on, and yeah, so that our audience can get to know you as well.
Yes, great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here today. I love this topic, so I'm excited to be sharing. I am Laura Zug, as you've shared, and I'm a community consultant. I work primarily helping entrepreneurs and founders launch and build new communities, or I jump into communities that maybe are looking to boost engagement or sort of troubleshoot. I work with a variety of different mission-driven companies, and I love it. My background was in marketing and PR, which I thought PR was going to be much more community-driven, and realized it's really a lot of press release writing. But I have called that early background to help me in my new community role. And I also really draw upon my skills as a mom. Moms have to be good listeners and empathetic, and I feel like those skills are really beneficial in community. When I applied for my very first community role, I had not even heard of the term community manager, but I read the job description and I thought I could do this in my sleep. I do this all day as a volunteer and as just an active person in our city and town. And I love it. I've loved this profession. I'm so glad to be here. And onboarding is what sets the stage for a really good experience for members. And I think it's one of the most critical pieces to nail as a community professional.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. And I think there's like so much that can go into it, right? I think that we don't realize that we think that getting folks in the gates is kind of just like the quick next step and we just need them to engage right away. And I think there's actually a lot of planning and a lot of managing, right? And setting expectations and designing the experience before folks even enter the community, right? And, we often say that, that first impressions are very important and very lasting. So I'm really happy we get to have this conversation today. All right, let's dive right in. We'll leave the chat open. If you have any questions, keep them in mind. I think we'll be able to look at the chat throughout this conversation. So if you have any questions that you would love to ask our speakers, just post it in the chat. We'll make sure to mark them down and get to them as we're hosting. So let's dive right in. Could you tell us, and the first question will be for Laura, could you tell us, a bit about your personal experience being onboarded to a community? In the past or recently, when was the last time you were onboarded to a community? And did you enjoy the process of being the onboardee, not the person who's onboarding?
Okay, I love this question. And as a community person, I'm in tons of communities. So yes, I am going to call you out, Clara, you and Kristen, who are here, because I joined the talk-based community, I guess, in the fall. And you were offering one-to-one calls. And I took you up on it. I was like, okay, I think they're serious. I'm just going to do this. And it was such a personalized way to join a community and has made me feel so much more connected to your product and your brand and to be an advocate. And then look where we are today. So I would use the word delightful for that experience. I also recently joined Tatiana Figueiredo's course in community building a community business. And she has an automated onboarding process. And it was also delightful. I don't know how to do the automation voodoo behind it, but she let you read the emails in the sequence or the pace that you wanted to read them, which I found really beneficial. You didn't just have to wait for the one email per day flow. And while the automation was happening, she kind of whisks you aside over to this delightful Notion page where she shares stories and images and video. And by the end of it, I felt so emotionally connected to Tatiana and to what she's creating. I thought that was really delightful, and I wish I could tell you how she did it.
Absolutely. Well, you're making me blush right off the bat. So thank you so much for the shout out, and happy to hear that you had so many great experiences recently, right? Both from kind of the personal and the automation standpoint, which I think we'll talk about. I think this will be a very, very hot topic in the conversation that we're going to have. So thank you for sharing that. Vera, over to you. When was the last time you were onboarded to a community, and did you enjoy the process?
I wanted to shout out actually the Google local guides. That was one of my most memorable and best experiences with getting onboarded to a community. Early on, I was like one of the early Yelp leaders, and then Google local experts started a program trying to, compete with Yelp, and I joined the community back when Google Plus was still around, and I was amazed with the way that they executed the in-person events and made you feel like part of the fold and like part of this like really intimate group. You really felt special, and it felt like more elite than the Yelp Elite. And so obviously we all became very vocal advocates for the local guides program, and now got invited to their summit at Google headquarters, the first 75 there. And little did we know we were actually building all the reviews that became part of like Google Maps. And so it was very smart of them to do that. But it never felt like I was being sold to or had the wool pulled over my eyes. I just was very, I made friends from that I'm friends with to this day. And for that, I'm so grateful to know people around the world who share a passion for reviewing business, taking pictures, sharing what we know about a business and supporting our local businesses. That has always been like one of my most favorite experiences with getting onboarded, because there's that person that the Shannon Sweetser, if anybody knows her, she was our local community leader. And so she always kind of had this like, here, you should know this person, and kind of just really made us feel welcome. I think that's really held on to that feeling. And I think that's what I carry with me to this day. She was my inspiration for what I do in community today.
Absolutely. Who knew that community could be part of your competitive advantage? I mean, I love that. That's absolutely amazing. And it's very obvious that that whole experience stuck with you. And I think this is also just like a first like great learning point, right? Even if you're building a community, that's maybe similar in some aspects to a business or a community that's out there, right? It doesn't always mean that you cannot offer a better experience, that the users might not have a great time. So I really love that story. Well, on to the easiest question of the evening, of the morning for some of us. Vera, over to you. What in your mind are like the top best practices that come to you when we talk about onboarding new members into the community? What are the first things that come to your mind?
For me, so to give you context for everyone, I'm building a community that's highly curated. I don't mean for it to be in the tens of thousands. If it does eventually, that's going to be great. But for now, the community that I'm building is highly curated for strategic CFOs and VPs of finance. And so they don't necessarily have to be at a tech company, and also senior managers and directors of finance. So I really want the top to bottom and bottom to top to meet in the middle, so that there's learning from both professional sides, because these leaders are seasoned, they've been there, done that, and they're meeting with those that are hungry and wanting to rise the ranks. And so I'm not looking to build 1,000 people community, just putting that out there. I want to create an experience that's very personalized. And so for me, one of the best practices for our community is to have that kind of personalized call. So I do a one-on-one call with every member that does join. It's just 15 minutes, easy to schedule for them. I know they're really busy, dealing with the entire company's financial planning. But they always take the time. I'm really amazed by that they do take the time, because it's all about what they're getting and giving in the community. And so that's why I take the time to do in that quick call. And I just want to stress to everyone, it's okay not to it's not scalable right now. That's absolutely fine, because these are the founding members. These are the first 100. I want them to have a fantastic experience, because they're going to do what I did as a local guide. They're going to be your megaphones. They're going to be your advocates. I literally just spoke to a founding member of the Netflix executive team this morning, and he's like, I'm all on board for my company's community, because of that trust building that we're building. And I think it's so important. If you're already building a community that's already large, that's a different story, obviously. And again, you really want people to have that touch. They feel like they're not just a faceless number in the sea of people. And when I was at Ironclad, I would also still have calls with folks. They were often in other communities similar to Ironclad's legal operations communities, where they're a member of 3,000, 5,000 communities. And they shared with me that they felt seen and heard in the Ironclad community, because I took the time to just say, hey, what are you here for? What do you need? How can I help? How can I connect you with somebody else? Or if I had an in-person event, I'd be that person. Someone would show up to an event by themselves and really scared that they took the time out of their schedule to show up and not know anyone. And I would just hey, come and meet this person. They're similar to you. They're in this, they're in sports law, and they would make that connection. And then people would come up to me and say, you made me feel less alone and less scared. And thank you so much for that. That little touch helps. And I know, from 100 people to 2,000 and tens of thousands, they may be hard to do, but find ways to build those experiences into that.
Absolutely. And what I'm hearing a lot there is also trust, right? If you're joining a completely new group, it can be very scary. And I think a lot of us end up just being lurkers just because we are afraid to post. I was literally a part of a community once with a little over 4,000 members. That was back it was still on Facebook. So it's a couple of years back, but I never actually posted in that community. And I then became one of the admins. I was running the events behind the community very, very after such a long time. And I still never posted because I was terrified that the community is going to not be welcoming, just not be, helpful. And I think that's exactly what you described, right? Being there, being the guide, making sure that you keep up to the promise, right, of why they joined the community in the first place, and building that trust. I think that's an absolute first best practice. So thank you for sharing that. Laura, over to you. What are the first best practices in onboarding new community members that come to your mind?
Okay, I first of all, I want to give a shout out to everyone talking about lurkers in the chat. I would love to ban that word. So I appreciate all the comments there. And Vera, I just want to underscore every single thing that you said. I think the best practice for onboarding is to remember that these are people, and to remember how we welcome and greet people in the real world. When I'm talking with founders about their onboarding process, I use a cocktail party analogy. Imagine inviting someone into your home. What do? You take their coat, you try to serve them, you help them get a drink or point them to where to go, and you introduce them to someone and share what they have in common. And you kind of just make them feel welcome. And in so many of our online communities or digital communities, we really get this backwards, where we put the onus on the member. So many times I've joined communities, and the first step in the onboarding is the introduction post. And I just want to say, we would never do that in real life. You would never invite someone to your home or into a large event and ask them to go take center stage and introduce themselves to a busy room. And so that's my number one tip, is make someone feel welcome. They should feel as if they belong. really focus on the belonging, which Vera gave amazing suggestions, and give them a very doable, concrete next step that is quick and easy. Help them have a fast win. So I think those are the best practices. But Vera, just +1 to everything she said.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we are also seeing a lot of comments on introduction posts. And I think that's a really, really hot take, because I don't think I've actually been a part of a community where this wasn't a practice. So I'm really, really happy for that perspective, because you're very right. Like, you would not ask a new friend that you're welcoming to your home to take center stage, stand on the kitchen table and, you know, just shout out their top 3 places that they like to, you know, like to go to learn something. So I really love that. And I think it's a really, really interesting point. So thank you both for sharing those first best practices to us. And now let's get to the nitty gritty of today's conversations. Laura, what have you kind of seen as like the key steps in the onboarding process? I know you mentioned a couple of the things, you know, that we would do in our in-home analogy. What would your ideal steps look like in our online world today? You know, what would be some of the, you know, quick wins that our listeners could implement today that would be, you know, helpful for their onboardees, for their new members?
I can tell you I can answer through a story. I was working in a community and we thought we had a crystal clear onboarding process. It was a series of short videos, each one with an action step and a link. And we shared it in the community hub, and it was also emailed out. And I believe like in the group, in the community. And then we had a new member join the team as in sort of like a consultant role. And a few of us were confused. He's super bright, but we were curious while we were repeating ourselves a lot, explaining what we thought were obvious and basic parts of the community. And so I asked him, or invited him to a call to understand, like, where's the breakdown happening here? And he shared something with me that has since impacted every onboarding campaign I've ever helped with. He said, I would never watch a video to learn how to use a website or an online space. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Well, no wonder he's confused. So within like a day or two after that conversation, we had revamped our onboarding and added like a PDF that was really, you know, we had a lot of visuals, we had a cheat sheet, we had a user guide, and really just tried to provide materials that could reach different learning styles. So I think that is important. And as we were saying before the call started, I think repetition. You know, we all think our onboarding is so crystal clear, and we have to picture our member with their Starbucks cup and their phone in their hand and like a ton of distraction, and they just might be skimming through. So what we think is like this amazing process that we've spent time in our quiet offices creating, we have to remember that the user on the other side is not giving it that same attention. So tell them live, tell them in email, tell them every time they come to an event. Just repeat yourself over and over through however you are communicating with your members. Like, you cannot say it enough.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we also have Stella posting here in the chat a couple of practices that she's seen, which where she once joined a community and they actually gave them 3 options of how they can be onboarded. First, doing an intro, signing up for a webinar, or checking out popular channels, which I think is also a really, really kind of nice way to spice up the usual intro message. But I really love what you shared on kind of just, you know, taking the user perspective, right? Taking the member's perspective, and, you know, repetition, not for the purpose of, you know, like oversharing, but for the purpose of, you know, giving them the understanding how they can make the most of this space, which I think is super important. Vera, what do you think are some of the like key ingredients, key steps in the onboarding process that we mustn't forget when we're planning it?
Well, I think one thing to think about is meet people where they are. So to Laura's point, not everybody is going to be on a Slack. And and not everybody's going to be, at an event. Maybe they prefer an email. I was surprised with the lawyer community that I was building. They love to read. They love Google Groups. I was like, well, okay, wow, Google Groups, way to go. They love email. But on the flip side, the legal operations folks who are working with technology, they wanted a Slack group. They wanted an online forum because they were more just more tech savvy compared to the lawyers. So it was this weird mix. And I used to stress over that. I'm like, oh my gosh, where am I going to do this thing? And I'm like, you know what? Meet people where they are, because they're going to come to where they are most comfortable at, right? And so I think it's good that, and this is why the calls or getting a taste or doing even a poll, just to understand where people are and getting an understanding where they like to go for meeting up, connecting. And so the first key ingredient for me would be like just setting expectations, right? And so once you get an understanding of what types of folks are in your community and how their habits are, their natural habitat is what I call it, then that's where I start to set the expectations in multiple formats. So I do have folks like the busy CFOs in my community that just want the email. They're like, I am not going to participate in the Slack. They just flat out said that. I'm like, that's okay. Just subscribe to the newsletter. You're going to get the information that way. I have the younger ones, the ones that are more tech savvy. Like, I want to be on the Slack. I'm like, there you go. You can meet with each other there. And in all of those different mediums, I set the expectations that I still share all the events and all the resources in the different places. I know that's multiple forms of media, but it works because they're all at different levels of learning, of consuming information, and connecting. Some people are introverted. They don't want to, and some of them are also still like, I'm too busy. I can't, I live in, well, I have one person who's in like a remote part of Canada. Like, I am nowhere near a major hub. I can't attend a dinner. So I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to do a virtual wine and chocolate tasting. And then you guys can chit chat about problems you're facing. And they're like, that sounds fantastic. Count me in. So there's a place for everyone. And that's what I try to do. And the second one would be that connecting people, because then it starts to validate the value of your community. They start to feel that, like, oh my gosh, for example, I had a member who joined from Brazil. And, I don't have many other members in Brazil just yet, but I do have a member who's based in Portugal who did business in Brazil. And so he said, why don't I connect the two of you? She's just in her first year as a head of finance. He's been there, done that for the last 20 years. And he was super happy to mentor her. And I just made that direct connection, and they're talking now. And that's all I can hope for. That's the kind of community that I want to build. And I think those are the three key ingredients for an onboarding, is that people feel that immediate value, like, oh, I just joined this and literally I feel like I got something out of this. I'll share a quick story. I did a women in finance, how I got here panel last month, and there were a number of women who joined because they were like, there's a lot of men in finance, and so like relieved, like, it's great to hear from other VPs of finance who've made their way up the ladder. And then subsequently hosted a dinner, in-person dinner in the Bay Area. And one of the people that had been in that webinar joined the community. And then she attended the dinner the following week. And she told me as she was walking out, and like, it was a fabulous night. She said, I'm not trying to like, flatter you, but this is exactly what I needed. I'm about to start a new job. I'm making the jump from an accountant as a controller and I want to become a VP of finance. And I was able to connect with 6 other leaders and get the information I needed to like take with me to my new role and actually execute. And I felt so like seen and heard. And I'm like, that's what I said. It's like, she took the words out of my mouth. I'm like, really? And she's like, yes, really. Well, I was like, good luck. Tell me how it goes. And I hope you join lead a webinar in a couple of months after you start your new role. And she's like, absolutely. She's already starting to become one of our biggest advocates in the community in just a month's time. So that was a pretty amazing experience.
That's absolutely amazing. And I think that's like That's unbelievable. And if you're able to encourage your members right off the bat, once they join, not to just like build that trust and understand how the community works and who's a member, but also to like make the most of it, right? To take the chances, not to be afraid to reach out, to raise a hand, right? We can always kind of be there as the moderators and leaders and guides. But I think if you are able to give that power to each of the members, right, by building that trust, you have an amazing community, right? Because then the community is kind of like building with you, which is really what you want. And I love what you both mentioned on just like, absolutely not forgetting about the user perspective, not forgetting about what it's like for them. So I think that's an important note as well. And Vera, you mentioned a couple of things that I kind of wanted to follow up on, and it is the beautiful bridge to my next question, which was, what are the top resources that you should share with the members once they're onboarding? I think we talked a little about like different content types. We talked about emails, videos, but what are the things that you're sharing with them? What do you want them to know when they join? We all heard about community guidelines, but, is there anything else that you would want them to have access to? And, maybe what types of contents have you shared that, via? Was it an email, video, et cetera, et cetera?
All of the above. So we hold monthly events like virtual webinars, also holding smaller events curated again for like, circles around what are OKRs for finance folks, for example, and in-person events. We're doing those dinners for 10, just very intimate again. Again, optimizing for that. People don't like to share in big groups. It's very intimidating. I know, I've been there. I once attended a 300-person event. It was supposed to be networking. I'm like, I don't know anyone. I'm just awkwardly standing here. Don't ever want people to feel that way. And so it's about, creating those little pockets and moment or opportunities to connect. I think announcements channel, if you're going to do it like a roundup in Slack, for example. I love the idea that someone put into the chat here on, doing, I think, like, what are your options to choose from? The monthly newsletter, I feel, is still a must. I know some people may not read the email all the time. I'm surprised with the open rates and the engagement. And finally, I ask our members to contribute in any way that they can. Again, those are the learnings I have from the conversations. I have one who wants to talk about usage-based pricing subscription strategy. I'm like, okay, way over my head, but I bet there's people out there who want to know about this, and there are. There's one who wants to talk about empathy and like how to, talk about the hard stuff, because there's a lot of things out there that they have to deal with in business, but my community particularly has to hold a lot of secrets. Because it's vital company information about the health of their companies. And so they have no one else to talk to. So it becomes like a therapy session. So I want to make sure that they're having that safe space. So I think number one, I want to impart is it's a safe space. Everything that's shared there is not going to be put on blast unless they're okay with it, like it's a webinar. And then secondly, it's like making sure they get that monthly newsletter and see that other members are contributing. The newsletter is composed of other members' contributions. It's not me telling them what to do. It's each other telling what each other can do. So I think that's the beauty of it. And I love that leaders are sharing their stories of how they got there. I think that's one thing I would keep in, plus a monthly meme. So just to keep it, finance people can laugh. So I'm very heartened by that.
Absolutely. Love getting all the way to memes to resources. Thank you for sharing that. Laura, over to you. What are some of the top resources that you have helped build or used or attributed to in the past in terms of community onboarding? What were the resources that you have shared with the members? What do you feel like is crucial for the new members to know when they join a community?
First of all, I'm always so like enthralled with what Vera is saying because I agree with so much of it. I think one takeaway is not to confuse information with an invitation. Like sometimes we give our new members so much information, but it might be a better strategy to kind of slow the fire hose coming at them and give them a really specific invitation. And I like to onboard new members into a ritual or a ritual at a time. So, helping them understand, like if there's a weekly post that goes out every week, like sort of the rationale for why that's important and helping them dive into that conversation. Or if there's an event coming up, like really making sure that a new member hears that they're welcome and that they are invited. And again, I come back to an example in the real world. Our family, we are here in a different city, and we have visited some churches. And one church sent us this really beautiful 4-color brochure, and it was very informative. And it sat on the kitchen counter, and then I threw it away. And it was great to see everything that was happening, but I just sort of felt even less connected because I was like, look at all these people having a great time, and I'm not in these pictures. I don't know these people. Versus someone reaching out, and I got one little short handwritten note and an invitation to come to, I don't even remember what it was. And that actually caused me to take action. So I think we can use that same principle in our online communities. Like, let's not give the equivalent of the 4-color beautiful brochure, as great as it is. Let's show people and guide them how to get engaged.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's so important, right? And it really comes back to what both of you were mentioning, right? Like, and what we also saw in the chat, right? Helping them become successful in their roles, in the community, why they came here. I think that's just so important. And I think that's always going to be such an important pillar of onboarding. So I'm so happy that we're highlighting that, because I absolutely agree, like 100% with both of you. I will do a quick time check and also send a quick note to everyone listening. If you have any questions that you would like for us to discuss, please feel free to ask. And like I said, we got a bunch of audience questions. So let's dive in. I'll take a couple that we already got during registrations, and we'll kind of see what's happening in the chat as well. So Laura, first question is over to you. And we have this one from Augustine. How often should you check in on your new members once they're onboarded, right? So let's say they have been in the community for the first week, they got all the emails, they got all the posts. Sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a couple of weeks, sometimes it's a couple of days, right? But how often should you check in on them once they went through, all the sequences, all the magic?
Yeah, I love this question. I tend to think about it in terms of the member journey, mapping out the member journey, how you want someone to come into your community, and ideally the transformation or the growth that they will experience, and thinking about key steps along that journey and making sure that you are checking in with them at those moments. So rather than a certain number of times, I would say you could have triggers that could be very time oriented, like check in with them at the month mark, check in with them at whatever you might think, or checking in with them just to make sure that they are indeed making this progress. So I would map it to the member journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Vera, what do you think about this question? How often should you check on new members once they're onboarded?
I would agree with a lot with what Laura said. Just, I wouldn't necessarily have a firm date on it. You could automate it. There are tools out there that do that. But then again, just kind of keep an eye on it. If you've seen that somebody's joined the community but hasn't engaged at all, if you can look at those metrics, send an email, shoot them an email, or I don't know if you have their phone number, pick up their phone and actually like, hey, what can we be doing better? This is a perfect opportunity for feedback. I think that's really important to know, is like getting the temperature of like where people are. And if you see that there's maybe a trend in that direction, that people have joined, but then they're cooling off and they're not even taking the next step in the process, meaning like starting to, talk or attend an event and they're not even registering for anything, there's just no activity at all, find out, what were they joining for? Maybe there was misalignment in what they expected. So it's a good time to retool and revisit that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, moving on. Vera, over to you. We have a question from Raya, and the question is, how would you approach onboarding differently for an opt-in, like a member-only community versus an open, publicly accessible community? Would you say that those processes are the same? Would you say they can look differently? How would you approach that?
That's an interesting question. I would say, I'm thinking when it's more open and public, I'm thinking more like a Facebook group, maybe like you're really into chunky cats. I'm in the group for chunky cats on Facebook. I will not lie. There was really low barrier to entry there. Totally cool. I think most members of those kinds of communities are lurkers anyways. They're just gonna like scroll and look at all the pictures of the cool cats. And that's totally fine. I think it depends on the objective or community. For my community, for example, the members opt in. I do make members apply for our community, and it's because we want to make sure there's set expectations of who you're going to meet in the community. You just don't want someone who's like an accounting student who is not anywhere close to being anywhere working in the strategic finance function in a multi-million-dollar company there, because they're going to get lost. And if they're looking for a mentor, they can certainly join like a alumni mentor group. That's probably a better place for them. So I think there are barriers in place in a way just to make sure that the experience you get as a member matches your expectations. I think those are great. But again, if you're just there for looking for cute dogs, totally it's okay, as long as I think people tend to share more. And I think Reddit's a great place too for that kind of. Some subreddits have rules, and I think rules are important. I'm a member of multiple gaming discords, and one of the rules of mine, I'm just gonna share this really quickly, because my gaming community encourages people to meet in person, I want to build trust. So I encourage, the rule for joining my community is that you have to use your real name, like just your first name, doesn't be the whole name. I actually had one person who said, I don't want to share my real name. I'm like, well, then I'm sorry, you can't join. That's not the kind of people I want in the community. Yeah. I want people that you can actually trust and be okay inviting to your home, because this is scary. You don't want just anybody to come off the street. Yeah. Go into your home. So anyways, I hope I answered the question there. That's
absolutely. I think like you said, the word I really loved there was the objective, right? Why are these people joining? Why, how can you give them the best experience? And I think that first step of gating the community can, assure that for when you want to help you get to that objective. Absolutely agree. Laura, what do you think? Are there different approaches in public open communities versus like member only opt-in communities? What have you kind of seen?
Well, I should say I primarily work only with paid communities. I think public open communities are harder to get engagement. So I am a little biased in my answer, but I would say in a paid community, that's where you have the real opportunity and almost the obligation to give a much more personalized experience. In an open community, again, I think it's a little bit more like coming to the buffet, and you're expecting your members to, you want to show them around, but this is a really great place to have an automated sequence and a little bit less one-to-one hand-holding. So that would probably be my answer.
Absolutely. I agree. And I love the buffet analogy, right? Everybody can kind of pick and choose what they want, versus on a smaller opt-in community, it's more catered, right? It's more kind of walking them through the process. I love that. All right. Continuing we had a couple of questions on automation. So let's dive in. We have a question from Jeremy. Jeremy is asking, when is the right time to start automating? Laura, what do you think? When is it the right time?
I would start with automating day one. I think let automated systems do what they can to free up your time as a community professional, community founder, so that you do have time to do those one-off, one-to-one, more personalized experiences. So I I think the time to start automating is the minute you open your community. It should have a well thought out, automated onboarding process in place.
Absolutely. And continuing on the automation wave, what are some of like onboarding systems you can put in place? Jenny's asking us this, that can help you with the process, Vera. What are some of systems you've tested? What can you kind of start easy from the bat to get started here?
Well, I'll call out Common Room. I'm using Common Room to integrate with Slack. And so I put in a workflow and have that, going through the, being like the welcome, here are all the different channels, things you can do. But that said, before they even join the Slack community, like I already mentioned, for every member that I have in my community, they've already applied and I've typically already had a conversation with them. So I'm familiar with them and can point them in the right direction. So the automation is more to like help them get a lay of the land of the Slack itself, but not necessarily for the entire community process or like the experience that I want them to have. So it's just
absolutely.
I want to reiterate that it's just a slice of their total experience.
Absolutely. And if you're looking to automate those invitations, you can always use Talkbase for that too. That's our newest feature that we love and cherish. But continuing with automations, Laura, over to you. What automations help or damage the onboarding process? What do you feel like should be automated versus what do you think should be like, kept on like more of the personal level?
That's a great question. I feel like it's a balance, right? Like the information can be communicated automatically. And it's more of the helping to build connection. Or I shared in the chat earlier about when we were chatting about the introduction posts, like I like to actually introduce members to the community and say, okay, so tell the existing community, okay, here's who joined, and then tag all the new people and ask the community to share one fact back with the new members. Like, how do you get most engaged here, or something similar? But use the automation to your advantage to give the lay of the land, like we've talked about. And then I want to encourage everyone to just trust yourself, right? Like follow your gut. So many times I feel like community professionals know what to do. And we stop ourselves because there's this little voice on our shoulder that says, oh, well, I can't do this for everyone. And I just want to free everyone in the room up to follow your gut and just do the one-off thing, even if you know that you could never scale that, because those one-to-one experiences are so powerful and can really be seeds inside your community to start developing a really strong core of integrated and engaged members. So trust yourself. That's my number one piece of advice to that question.
Absolutely. I love that answer. Vera, what are your thoughts on automation? Where can it help? Where can it do damage? How can we think about it?
I agree with Laura. I mean, there's a hybrid approach. I think it's helpful as you scale and get into the hundreds, tens of thousands of folks, be it like an online forum or more of a chat tool like Slack or Discord. I know it certainly helps for me, like with Discord, for example, I do a lot of events. And so there are different tools that automate, like, how events are shared, et cetera. But still, there's a hefty part of the manual where I am actively moderating conversations because I want to make sure, my members are on point. They're not just talking about, getting off topic and not, self-promoting unless there's a self-promotion channel. And so there's a fair bit of like still being engaged and tuned in because we are the guides. And so we should be very aware of that. And there are tools to kind of like, obviously capture keywords if there are things, because I recognize that some communities are just super large and they can't help but like have just massive teams, people coming through all of that and addressing those But for those that are like me who have smaller communities, it's team of one, and we do our best to make sure that we're on top of it.
Absolutely. I love community teams of one. I think those are very common, and I was a community team of one for a very long time as well. So there's always a lot of appreciation that goes that way. And we had a quick question in the chat that I just wanted to highlight. Joel asked us, how would you scale introducing new members to your community if your community is application only and is large, say 10,000 members plus? I also saw Laura already share an article that our friend Olga just posted on her Medium about onboarding buddy programs. But I was wondering if either of you have any other tips on, how you can scale this sort of robust introduction program for a community that's for application only, but already grew to, 10K members plus. If one of you wants to start us off with the answer here.
I'm happy to answer that. And it goes somewhat along the lines of the article, Olga Koenig. If you haven't downloaded this article, I really recommend you read it, because she walks through step by step how to bring more people alongside you to help with this process, and to scale your onboarding in a way where it remains very personalized. And yes, I'm seeing in the chat about creating cohorts. I think that could be helpful. Having like regular events where it's like an orientation where you're quickly putting people into smaller breakout rooms to meet one another. I think, just getting really creative, bringing other people into your community, even if you have a paid community team of one. Hopefully, if you have 10,000 people in your community, you have the resources to have even just some contract people in your community. I've helped train community ambassadors to play this role. So I think getting creative. What I love about community ambassadors or a buddy program is it allows more voices into the conversation. Like, not everyone in a community is going to naturally be aligned maybe with my personality style, but if I could bring in 5 or 6 others who may have different traits or different experiences, chances are that a new member will find one of the 5 with whom they feel a stronger connection. So just don't struggle alone. Bring in some more help. People are happy to be asked. And I think that enhances the whole community to have more voices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I see Vera also mentioning in the chat for that you should definitely look at the buddy program, but also cohorting, right? I think doing cohorts and then, doing this kind of at a batch where folks can meet each other, talk to each other. I think that's really fun. Also, I think at this scale, you can always think about, easy and practical way to do directories so that folks can also kind of navigate and find each other, right? And find the help. So yeah, I think that was a good one. Cool. Well, we're at time, 2 minutes over, but I wanted to make sure that we answer all the questions that we had. Vera, Laura, thank you both so much for joining me for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I really loved everything that you shared, from making sure that we are being the guides in our communities, all the way to being smart about automations, thinking about all the different resources from email to PDFs to videos that we can use. I really loved the conversation. I can see that our audience did in the chat as well. So again, Laura, Vera, thank you so much for the chat, and yeah, hope to see everyone in our community group.
Thanks for having us, Clara. It was awesome.
Absolutely.
+1. Thank you all. See you.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.